everybody. This is Julie Cohen. I am CEO of Work Life Leader, and we are an executive coaching, leadership development, and training organization. And you are here for Work Life Leader Live. This is my broadcast that I try to do as frequently as possible, where I talk with smart people about interesting topics that relate to work, life, and leadership, as well as any intersection of those three things. Today we have a great guest and a really interesting topic. But before that, I want to remind you, we have these conversations ideally once or twice a week, as well as the Work Life Leader Live book group, which is coming up in the next month, where we're going to be speaking about the book that month it's usually somewhere on my desk, but it's the first 90 days. And then we have some other great topics coming up that I'll let you know about at the end of our broadcast. But with no further ado, I want to bring in our guest today. This is Federico Demarin. Hi, Federico.
Hi, how are you, Julie?
Good. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to introduce you with all the details in a moment. But where are you calling in from today? Where's your office?
I'm at the office in Miami Gardens, very close to Miami. And I am coming to the office twice a week. So great. A little bit of both words today.
Good. Yeah. Your background looks very professional. It's always, you won't be on the Rate My Room to see about your house furnishings today. So, so today's topic, kind of had fun with the title. It's called HighPotential Talent Development: The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. We don't think there's any ugly and not much bad about HighPotential talent development, but we're going to dive into that because having a robust pipeline of top talent helps you build your organization and continue on a really great trajectory. And if you're watching and you've been identified as a high potential talent, we're going to talk about that too. But before we dive in, I want to formally introduce Federico Demarin. Federico is a human resources executive with over 20 years of HR experience in renowned global companies where he's occupied local, regional, and global roles. Currently, he is a senior vice president of HR for 360 Duty Free, which is a travel retail company with worldwide operations. He's also a professional coach, so go coaching, and an EQ practitioner providing professional consulting services to organizations and educational institutions around such topics as organizational development, HR startups, employee value proposition, leadership, team building, the retail and luxury industries, and more. He is also a professor, an MBA professor for the Esden Institute in Mexico and Colombia, and a schema, and I may not be pronouncing it right, Executive Education Institute in France and China. So we have an expert in HR with a global perspective, and it's great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Julie. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, our topic today is around high potential talent. And for those of you who are watching, I always like to start our conversations with an icebreaker to get to know our guest. And I'm gonna share that icebreaker in a minute. But before I do, I want to welcome anyone who's watching. If you are watching live, and today is Tuesday, April 20th, if you're watching live and it's around noon Eastern, we'd love to know you're here. So please, in the chat box and whatever platform you're watching, say hello, tell us where you're from. And if you use #live, we'll know you're watching it real time. We're going to be coming to you throughout our time today, asking for your input, for your questions, and comments. So let us know you're here. And I'm going to start with the icebreaker. All right, Federico. So where in your life or your work were you identified as high potential, either formally or informally, and how did it feel?
Well, being called a high potential, it's very particular. It hasn't happened for a long time. In the past, you were sometimes being called valuable or many other things, but not necessarily high potential. But I remember the first time that happened to me, I felt incredibly proud. I was still in college, working professionally, already in HR, and I received this kind of commitment saying, you not only have you been performing, but you show potential to grow. So I wasn't called a high potential, but I was that was the exact wording. And I felt at that moment, the strength of that statement. I felt like everything I had done, all the effort, especially when you see that there's other people that may have an easier going at work, but you always put the extra mile. I felt rewarded. I felt recognized, and the energy. That's how I can summarize it. I felt proud.
Good, cool. All right. So I'm going to answer that question. But before I do, I want to welcome a couple people. Hi, Jillian Begelman from New York City. Great to see you. And we have a LinkedIn user from Philadelphia. And for some reason, your name is not coming up on my screen. But it's always good to have Philadelphia in the house. And we're going to come to you and ask you the same icebreaker. When in the past have you been identified as high potential, either in your professional life or your personal life, and how did it feel? So I'm going to share. I'm going to go back to the first time that I can remember me being identified as high potential, and it was in 5th grade, and it was in school, in elementary school. It was called the gifted program is what they called it. And so, it's kind of that similar thing is, academically, I was identified as high potential. And the first thing they wanted to do was for the next year, which was 6th grade, they wanted to pull me out of the school that I would have normally gone to with all of my friends. And I was going to have to go to a different school. And I got really scared. And I was pretty shy back then, and I turned it down. I told my parents I didn't want to go to that other school. I wanted to stay with my friends. And so I didn't do that gifted program for 6th grade. And so that was my first reaction to high potential was, I don't want to be pulled out and, have a change in relationship with my peers. So I did go on the next year when I went back into kind of middle school. I did get into that. I said yes to that program, but then I was in a different environment and I was a little more mature and I wasn't as afraid of going to a new school because I had to go to the new school anyway. So it's just very interesting that was my first, my first instinct was, you're going to pull me away from what I know and what I'm comfortable with. So let's see. Yeah. We have a couple more people who've joined us. Hi, Sabrina Sax, man. Anyone else, if you're watching live, this is Work Life Leader Live, and we are talking about high potential talent development. And the icebreaker, I want to turn it over to the audience, anyone who's watching, to share if you have had any experiences being identified as high potential, professionally or personally, what it was like, how did it affect you? And the next level we're going to go to, if you're in an organization and you either are in human resources and run high potential programs, we'd love to hear kind of how you feel about that. There is no right or wrong answer in what we're talking about today, so all perspectives are welcome. So let's start with our first question. I always like to get to the basics is, should we have high potential programs? Why are we talking about high potential and programs in general, but should we have high potential programs, Federico?
Well, to me, the answer is yes. And as long as you're interested in attracting and motivating people to stay, those people that could make a difference in the right environment. So if, we've been talking about the talent challenge for several years, a decade, I would say, how companies struggle to attract and retain these highly valuable contributors, those people that can actually make a difference if the environment is the right one. And that involves many things, of course. But if you are that company that is willing to play this endless game, because this is not a race with it where you say, now I can retain and attract talent. No, this is an endless game. So as a company, you need to really commit to play this game long term, right? It's about staying in the game, and I'm quoting Simon Sinek because it's a book that I enjoy a lot about the endless game, and I think this reflects exactly what he means. If you want to attract and motivate these people to stay in your company, you need to have a program that is transparent, that is authentic and people can trust. And I think leaders also needs to support it. Otherwise, it becomes a you know a, a lot of promises. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. I'm curious, what do you say? And this is kind of a leading question because we did talk a little before, but I'm curious what you say to people who say, well, high potential programs, that makes people like kind of the experience I had as a fifth grader. Some people might feel, left out, or we shouldn't, because what about all people? You shared that analogy of, kind of your if you have different kids. I really like that. So I don't know if you can answer it in the context and share that story, because I thought that story really hit home.
Sure, of course. And I can continue with that analogy. I mean, if you have several kids and one of your kid shows a lot of potential in a specific sport, and you want to give them, or sport or music or dance, whatever it is, but you say, he or she might be very good at this. Let's just find out first if he or she really likes to do this. But then you cannot just focus on one kid, right? You have other kids, and your other kids may not have the same interest, the same commitment, or the same talent, but they're still there. And if also one of your talented kid needs your attention and dedication, but if the other kid believes that he or she doesn't have your attention and dedication, we also sabotage that process. And I think the same happens in companies. You cannot just dedicate all your attention and resources and time, especially as a manager, to serve those high potentials. You need to pay attention to everyone else that is also performing. Don't forget, we're talking about people that perform, but not necessarily those talented individuals that could grow within the organization. They might be good and talented to perform, but they are not so much interested in growing. If you don't care for them, those high potentials will never have a shot at growing, because they will be covering the backs of those other people that lead. So, turnover could really affect a high potential plan.
Right.
So you need to care for all of them.
Right. Or the other side, those high potential talent will leave and go somewhere else where they can get the kind of development that they want and feel like they're being challenged and being, I don't like the word groomed, but being nurtured to, move in a direction that is aligned with their, professional and leadership, preferences. So really, really good point. I think that concept of children, for those who are parents, or if you're nieces or nephews, or if you can remember back to if you had siblings, by supporting one person's talent, it does not have to diminish someone else's talent. So really, really great analogy. So let's move forward. How do and this is a very big question, but I want to look at the assessing high potential talent and the distinction between high potential versus high performance. Let's talk about some best practices and some things that don't work.
Well, I think performance is very important for every company, because there's no future without the results that make it happen. So you need to decide as an organization what performance is. Short term, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. You can work on those levels, but you need to understand what makes the person succeed short term, bringing value to the organization. And that usually starts with goal setting. And there are many practices today, companies that they don't have a formal performance evaluation. You don't actually need one in order to know which ones are your high performers. You do need to have some sort of measurement to understand if a person is performing, overperforming, or underperforming, and use that to understand which ones are actually bringing the value based on the expectations. And with expectations, I would like to clarify, is the what, the actual result, but also the how, because a value that is not sustainable, if I have to step on everybody's heads to get my result, that is not sustainable. So performance has to be the combination of the what I get and how I get it. So that I would summarize performance.
Well, you bring up, a really good point. And kind of in my world of coaching and training and leadership development, kind of the how is critical. Sometimes, and I don't do this anymore. When I was a baby coach, 15, 20 years ago, I would sometimes get called into organizations saying, we have this great leader, but they're great at sales, they're great at this, they're great at that, but no one wants to be on their team, or their entire team is resigning, or they're causing their team undue stress, and they're damaging relationships. Can you help them be better at X? And I used to go in and try to coach those folks, but they were never, well, not never, they were rarely successful, because often that high performer was so focused on one area, and it wasn't the how, it was only the what. I think, now, kind of where I am professionally, and kind of my philosophy around leadership development and talent development is, coaching and development, isn't for fixing. The fixing needs to be happening in the performance management process, not in the leadership development process. And so I love how you incorporated that. It's not just what, it has to be how. And I think the other thread, and I'll definitely want your thoughts on this, is around organizational culture. Are the organizational values, which I guess is the how, are they aligned? And so do you have those expectations that talent who continue to develop here, who are part of our succession plan, they need to deliver on results, and they need to be aligned with what we believe. So I don't know if how that works and fits in your kind of plan.
Of course, and I think both in performance and potential, the one thing that it tends to fail is the authenticity of the statement, of the how, and also what it makes a person successful in the future. So results could be king, and there's nothing wrong with that, except that if a king is a despot, let's just put it that way, if the only voice to rule things, then you will sacrifice long term for short term. You are not playing a game, you're playing a short term result oriented business. And unfortunately, I've seen also many cases of people that are successful at bringing results, sacrificing the how, and that how becomes something, I'm sure they can develop it, I'm sure they can change it. So it's something that you as a company, not on paper, because your papers are very clear, you cannot be successful without the how, but then in reality you promote those individuals and you give them bigger roles and bigger pay and opportunities based on the idea that they can actually develop that piece that is not functioning. Unfortunately, you need a very strong culture with a very strong leadership commitment long term to understand there's no value in short-term results that are not sustainable. If a person gets promoted on those parameters and they start spreading that criteria in the organization, then it would be very hard for you to retain high potentials, because those people want more than just deliver results. More than ever nowadays, people want to believe that they're following a purpose, not just bringing value to shareholders or to an owner. They want to believe that they're serving purpose.
Right. And I think that has evolved, that 20 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, I don't think this was part of the conversation 20 years ago, the why. I mean, the how was, but that meaning, I think that has evolved. I know, when I graduated university, 30 years ago, I wasn't thinking about that at all. I just wanted, a job that, well, you know what, actually, I think I wanted a job that I was happy at and I could do well. And that's why I made some of my career choices early on. But, that wasn't a concept. Organizations weren't thinking about that at that point.
Of course not.
So HighPotential, who could be high potential? Where does high potential fall in the organizational hierarchy?
So I think companies that are visionary, they're always looking at and trying to anticipate the future. They need to really pay attention and work sometimes within the organization, but also with outside help, because outside help is always bring a more objective view. And I think this is really important, because when you look forward, you have to challenge your current success factors. So once you as a company analyze and discuss and understand what is it that will make us successful in the future, what kind of people are we going to need in that future, and what actually facilitates people to grow through the ranks in this company, the culture, right? So why do we normally promote people? What are the key characteristics? And bringing back again, if we only promote people based on their results, then I wouldn't be surprised if leader is not consistent leadership, because it's not the criteria, right? So the more time the company invests in understanding this is where we want to go, we don't know exactly, it's not a place, it's not a spot, it's a journey. And then when people do the same, and I think this is also something that has been neglected for a long time, people really trying to understand what is it that they want, what is it that they want to do, what is it that makes them successful in the company, with proper coaching, with proper mentoring, exploring, concepts like I feel happy. Okay, what does it really mean, right? In terms of the actual things that you're doing. Because if you're a salesperson and selling you makes you happy, when you become a sales manager, you're not going to sell anymore. So is it still going to make you happy being a sales manager? Because now you're going to manage people. That is going to be your job,
right,
not selling. So that conversation, exploring people's expectations, is very important. And I think the most honest it gets, with people saying, look, what I want is just better pay, because right now I really need to improve my economy. And what I'm looking for is pay. So tell me, where should I go? And you as a leader and as a coach really need to confront that conversation and say, okay, we can discuss options where you can make that, and also will you bring value to the organization, because those two journeys need to go together. Otherwise, it will not work.
All right. So you've said so many interesting things. We could go on 12 tangents, but I want to pause, reintroduce you and us, and see if we have any audience questions. We definitely have people viewing. I can see people are here. So I am speaking with Federico Demarin, Senior Vice President of Human Resources at 360 Duty Free. And we're talking about high potential talent development. And if you are watching live, it is Tuesday, April 20th. It's almost 12:30 Eastern. We'd love to hear your questions and comments, your thoughts around high potential talent development, or any of the topics that Federico and I have been discussing. I'm going to drill down. I told you earlier I like to go on some tangents, but you said something to me that's so important that I don't see happening enough. That distinction between a salesperson who loves it and is fantastic, who's then promoted to the sales manager, and attempts to do the role and loses that, that flow, that energy, that excitement in their role. Having those discussions, a good manager needs to be having those discussions with their direct reports, the people that they work with. So it's a safe place to have that conversation, because I think in a lot of organizations, the idea of saying, yeah, this is what I want, and it may not be aligned with what the organization or HR or leadership has in mind for that individual, is really tricky. One of the things I talk about with my clients who are sometimes struggling with similar issues is letting people know that they each have their own relationship to their work. And like you said, sometimes people are working for an economic reason, and they don't need joy. They want to do their job well, get paid as much as possible, or get paid fairly. And their work is contained. And then on the flip side, some people, they get all their meaning from their work. And so they want more than just a paycheck. I think, individuals fall anywhere on that continuum. And to make assumptions about any of that, I think puts the organization at a deficit, because you might be giving your organization, your leaders or your high potential talent or anyone in your organization something that they may not want. And so that challenges those individual conversations and how to have them, in a safe environment where your answer, where it's not a leading question, that it's really an authentic question. And you talked about authenticity. So I just wanted to acknowledge that distinction is really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think as a manager who wants to develop someone, the clearer you are in terms of that journey, it's the easiest it will be for people to understand the purpose. Because I remember very clearly a conversation that I had with HighPotential that was having issues because she felt she was not the outcome of her being a high potential was actually detrimental. And I spoke to her and said, like, why do you feel that way? Just like, my manager now is constantly making me cover other people, and I have more workload than I ever had. And okay, did you discuss that with your manager at the beginning? He said, no, he said he was going to give me development opportunities, but all I get is more work. And so what do you think is a development opportunity? Whether I will be sent out to, I presented him with many courses and MBA programs that I wanted to participate, and I didn't get any. I only got, work. And eventually I got them together because he was concerned. The manager really wanted to develop her. And he says, look, I did all this because this is what will give you the promotion that you're looking for, not the course. We can do the course, that's the theory. But without these experiences, this exposure, you will never get that promotion that you're looking for. But that was a realization moment where she understood, okay, now I see what it means, a development plan for me, and do I still want it? Because yes, it has sacrifice. It comes with a cost. It's not for free, right? It's not like suddenly someone else comes in to do your job and then you get to do development. No, you still have to do your job, right? So this honesty at the beginning, explaining very clearly, this is what I'm going to need from you. This is what I'm willing to do and facilitate for you as a manager. And as an employee, the same thing. I don't really know what I want, honestly, as an employee. And this happens a lot with the younger generations, that they don't really know what they want. And it's totally fine, as long as they understand the different ways to explore it will imply some sort of sacrifice, some sort of investment and effort. And then they should never drop that search for what is it that they want. And I think that is also neglected in companies. People really, they don't take the time to understand their own purpose, to figure out what is it, who am I? What is it that really makes me feel, proud, that fulfills my professional needs, that I feel, eager to come to work every day, or I feel proud of what I've done. So those, that kind of introspection helps a lot, and that conversation with the manager is key.
Yeah, and I agree with you. These conversations don't necessarily happen. I mean, if those conversations were happening, frequently or regularly in organizations, I think we'd have, I can't remember pre-pandemic. I remember seeing one of the Gallup surveys pre-pandemic. I think they said a third of the workforce that they surveyed is actively unengaged, and another third is kind of just there, and with only 1/3 being fully engaged in their work. And those were pretty rough numbers. That's pretty tough. If 2/3, 65-70% of your workforce is either actively unengaged or just kind of
and I think
engagement.
and I think it's a very important topic, because sometimes, work can easily become very transactional, right? You come, you do things, you come to work, you do things, you go home. And managers sometimes are comfortable with that, because that means less conflict, less time to try to figure out what is underneath a person performing or underperforming. If someone is performing and is not asking you questions and is not, pushing for things, you as a manager are in a comfort zone, right? So you go quiet and let it be transactional. The problem is when you're at home, that is already, it's a growing conflict, even when we share the office space. But when people are at home, with isolated from you as a manager, your relationship becomes transactional. You need something, I answer. We do some, ice breaking chat, but we don't continue having this relationship that only happens when people spend time together. And I'm not saying it cannot happen in virtual environment. It can, but it requires more effort.
Right.
You need to really understand that sometimes you need to talk to people just to talk, not to solve a problem or to address a transaction in your job. You really need to talk.
And therein lies, again, these are expectations as well as talents. To just be able to talk to someone on your team does not come naturally to everyone. And so if that is an expectation, I mean, to you and I, that seems like common sense. And yet, I've worked with hundreds of people that, we have to teach them how to do that, which is fine. I mean, that's great for people who want to learn about it. And yet then organizationally, again, it all goes back to culture. The organization has to value that and say, you should be investing time in these conversations, and they shouldn't just be reactive. They shouldn't just be when, someone is in crisis, or when someone tells us they're leaving and we try to save them. And so I think that's really important. I want to pause and see where we are. It's funny, our topic here is high potential talent, and you can see how this is integrated into so much more around, culture, around really just what it means to be human in the world of work. It's paying attention that, the workplace is made up of individuals, and they may be sitting together, but, I think more and more, we may not be sitting together, but that doesn't mean the needs individuals have, are not, still as integral and important. So let me reintroduce Federico Demarin, Senior Vice President of HR at 360 Duty Free, along with many other credentials. And, if you're watching live, it's Tuesday, April 20th. We're a little past 12:30 Eastern. And I know for me, this is an extremely interesting conversation around things that I really care about and have always been trying to see how different organizations do this well, how they develop their talent, how they retain their talent, how they create a workplace for all people to be at their best, and for the best to continue to grow in a way that's aligned with the individual and the organizational results. So that's why we're talking about high potential. So for those of you who are already here and have heard Federico so far, please ask questions. Put questions in the comment box, or thoughts. We'd love to hear what you think. I want to go the contrarian point of view, because I do run a leadership development and training company, and we do target high potential talent. And we work with all levels of talent in all organizations. But one of my taglines for my company is holistic leadership development for high potential talent. So I believe in the value of doing that. I've run into some roadblocks when I've done business development. I've gotten from people, we don't do high potential talent. We think all of our talent is high potential, so we focus on all talent. Now, you've again acknowledged that in the beginning by sharing your story. From a tactical standpoint, like what happens in organizations, what do you do for, if there is some friction in an organization where you do have a program and people are identified, and other folks do feel, why not me? How come I wasn't identified?
Sure. And I think there's, as long as organizations have limited resources, there's always going to be friction. I think there's a very clear logical contradiction between focusing on everyone. You cannot focus on everyone, otherwise you're not focusing, right? So, and I haven't met or heard of a single organization that has unlimited resources to invest in everyone. When a company says, we focus on everyone, basically what they're saying is we don't know how we allocate resources, or maybe we don't want to discuss it openly. There's always a criteria. It's either clear or unclear, but there's always a criteria to allocate resources and focus on people and decide who gets promoted, right? So those things are actually happening. The things that create conflict are actually happening even without having this program, because eventually someone gets promoted and the rest of the people say, like, why not me? I also applied. And then there's no clear explanation, at least not sustained by the company's systems and processes. It is a single manager explaining an individual criteria. And that criteria is going to be different from the guy next door in a different department. Or even if that manager changes, it's going to be someone else applying a different criteria. And that creates a lot of uncertainty for people to understand, how do I succeed in this company, right? So roadblocks will always be there. And I think all these conversations are very emotional. You need empathic leaders. You need people that are willing to face those conversations open and honestly. And when you see, I think the most difficult conversation for a manager is when you have someone in your team that is performing, but you don't see the potential. You don't see, based on the criteria, not your own, but the company's criteria, you don't think that person will actually succeed in more senior roles. So when you get that person and you need to explain, look, you're a good contributor. I value what you do. Tell me what you want to do, and tell me what kind of journey you want to go. So that person can mention several things. And you as a leader need to understand, okay, how can I find a win-win with this individual? It's not about saying, sorry, you didn't make the cut. Let's talk next year. That is the worst. And sometimes
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Managers do that, or they avoid the conversation. They procrastinate, or they say, no, you're valuable too, but I cannot do it for everyone this year, but let's just talk next year and I'm sure you can do it better. But deep down, they don't believe it. They're just buying time because they don't want to lose that person. And I understand that, but there might be other ways, right? There might be better ways. It doesn't mean lying to that person and says, no, everyone is a winner, right? No, it's unfortunately not. What you can explain is, look, there's a criteria that is not mine, is the company's criteria to identify certain people that could, and this is important, there's nothing guaranteed, that could grow into specific roles. But it doesn't mean you can't. I can still, as a manager, my commitment to you as your manager is to help you develop. Now, I may not have a decision on the company's resources because it's not my money, it's the company's money. But I can still help you develop. And maybe you can still grasp that opportunity. But managers have to commit. Right. That is the difficult.
And that needs to be part of the job description, and there needs to be time invested in that. And I want to. It's funny because so much of what you said I run into kind of from being on the other side of the fence, and I think transparency really matters here. In one organization that we work with, the HighPotential program that my company runs, we've been there for over 4 years, and they've always been very clear that this is for who they see as, people who are future leaders, and, kind of increasing impact and influence in the organization. I think in the first year when they did this and it was new, there was some hesitancy, like, oh, are people going to feel if they don't get selected for this? Because they will know when the person on your team is out for 6 hours of training, or gets to come in 90 minutes late because they're taking the session from home because they've been approved to be in a private space for those 90 minutes. Where are you? And so instead of kind of being quiet about it, this organization kind of elevated the program, and now people want to get involved in it. And there's a nomination process every year that each organizational, there's certain leaders who get to nominate X amount of people. And it's not competition. It's, what do I need to do to get on the list? First, what do I need to be nominated? So it's kind of like the Academy Awards, where it's an honor to be nominated. So that's the first step. Like the first year getting nominated is a big deal. And then they go from, X to then the number of people, that are actually in the program. And some people have been nominated 2 or 3 times until they've gotten in. And now we're, for this organization, they're approaching the 5th year. And, it's part of people's professional, development plan. Hey, I want to get into this program. And the organization is being very strategic with everyone who's completed the program, and are mindful of those who know about it and how to get there, and that they want, ideally that they'll bring everyone through if and when, they're ready for it. So I think that transparency is really good. Yet on the flip side, I've definitely worked with organizations. We have these programs, but we call them different things because we don't want people to feel bad that they're not doing it. And I think you can turn that around and make it motivating. This is open for everyone if, like you said, if the criteria is clear, and people get where it fits in, and organizational leadership supports it. And that is where I see the challenges sometimes, where we'll spend money on this program, but we're going to not give you time to fully get the most out of the program. And I think that causes challenges when organizational leadership, the most senior folks, don't kind of walk the talk or put the time in to understand the program and engage with participants. So I threw a lot out there. What do you think?
No, I think it's, the honest conversation is a must if we want to, if companies wants to grow as society is growing and developing. You cannot continue giving political answers saying, no, you're a very valuable, blah, 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 you're gonna get your opportunity. I mean, just be honest. You don't have to tell the person, I don't believe in you, because that perhaps is not true. And if it is, as a leader, you should really ask yourself, how did you come up with such a strong opinion of an individual that individual can actually change over years? I am a strong believer that anyone can develop absolutely anything. Some people may have it easier than others. That is the truth. Someone that is talented playing an instrument could reach heavens, while me, for example, that I'm very bad at playing guitar. I could only reach a certain level, but I can definitely continue improving. So that is the key. As a leader, you need to, if you value a person, it's because that person is performing, is bringing you something that you value for your team or your organization. So you want to keep them. So if you truly want to keep them, then first of all, you need to see how far you're willing to go. Yeah. And second, you need to understand and come into peace with the idea that they could leave. Because unfortunately, because managers feel, if I am too honest, that person is going to resign. And then I'm not honest, and I'm just buying time and said, oh, next year we're going to do this next year, and next year is another year. I find another excuse, or maybe she or he forgets about it, and I'm just getting another year of performance. You need to, as a true honest leader, you need to let go of the idea that you cannot lose a person. And
Right.
if you truly cannot lose a person as a leader, you really need to think, how are you organizing your team,
Yeah.
and who's doing what, and how knowledge is shared and administered. Because if you're dependent of an individual and you don't believe in that person being a high potential, so you don't want to lose it, but you want to keep it, lying cannot be the answer, not anymore. And
Um,
confidentiality either. Sometimes you think, please don't share this with anybody. It doesn't exist anymore. It just doesn't exist. People are sharing salaries, they're sharing all conversations, and we can discuss if it's right or wrong. But for sure, as a leader, you cannot depend on people being quiet about their rewards
Correct.
in order to,
100%.
to work.
Um, I was going to say, so as the coach in me got frightened, and I have to always say, confidentiality does exist in the coaching relationship. It's always there in the coaching relationship. Anywhere else it doesn't exist, but with your coach, it
No,
exists.
there's a professional obligation, which is different, right? From
Yeah, yeah.
manager to employee. Employees do not have an obligation, and even if they do, uh, it happens. And I think you cannot fight reality. People talk, and if their colleagues with which they have relationships, if they ask you, were you selected for that development program, what are you going to say? No? Are you demanding as a manager that they start lying to their
Right.
teammates? No, you cannot do that.
That's crazy.
That
Yes.
breaks the whole authenticity of the program, because that's not the kind of company that person wants to work for. That you need to hide as a high potential and lie just to sustain the system, right? That's not the right way to start.
Yeah.
So I think honesty is paramount, and
Exactly.
commitment as a leader, from the top all the way down, all the people that are above that individual, they need to commit to the same statement, right?
All right. So we're coming up to the end. So I want to. It's funny. There's a lot of people watching. I think they're just probably captivated by the content here because we're throwing a lot of great stuff here. But before we wrap up, I'm going to give a final shout out to Federico Demarin, Senior Vice President of HR at 360 Duty Free, as well as if you've watched any of Federico's comments, he is a professor at various business schools where he shares his expertise around HR and other business issues, which we're having the honor of getting some of that. So thank you, Federico. But before we wrap up, if any last questions, please put them in the chat box. I always like to end with what I call the big rock. So our topic, high potential talent development. I think you and I have agreed, there's a lot of good. Sometimes it's done right. Sometimes it's not done right. And there may be some bad. I don't see much ugly. And for those of you, I'll put a link to the movie, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. I had to go look it up. I like the phrase, and I realized the movie came out the year I was born, but I'd heard about the movie for many years. What are the one or two important points of this discussion that you want people to walk away with?
I think the most important thing is, if you are one of those individuals that it's either you want to be one of those high potentials, or you are today, or you're not. There's a fundamental piece that you need to focus on, is really to understand what is it that you want. I struggle a long time, and I am a professional in HR, a coach, and I struggled a long time to really understand my purpose, what makes me happy, what makes me feel fulfilled. And sometimes are things that rationally do not make sense. For example, stress. Stress is bad, running from left to right. And it took me time to understand that I thrive in those environments where you actually are under pressure. And that doesn't really make sense, but it takes time to really understand, yes, that's how I thrive. And although I run and I kind of suffer, and sometimes it's like I cannot do it, but that brings the best out of you and gives you the biggest reward at the end. And it's a journey. So that is me. Of course, people can have different motivators, but also that time to to look within yourself and to really understand what is my journey, what is it that I want. And then the clearer you communicate that to an organization, the easier it will be for them and that manager to understand where's the win-win. Where can I get something for the organization and myself as a leader, and make this person feel, fulfilled. Second, if you're one leader, you really have to understand your commitment to develop people. If you don't have that within you, you're always going to struggle with this, always, because high potentials is for leaders, not for administrators. You need to really focus on people, and as I said, in everyone. You can still prioritize some individuals over others when it comes to resources and your time and attention, but everyone is in your team, and you need to figure out how to get the best out of what they can bring.
Awesome. Well, Federico, thank you so much. We've been getting a bunch of comments for thank yous, and one viewer just said this has been riveting. Thank you. So I will echo that. And before we say goodbye, if people want to reach you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
The easiest way would be through LinkedIn. I try to stay, up to date with messages and comments, although sometimes there's a lot of soliciting on LinkedIn, but I try to stay connected with everyone. So LinkedIn would be the best.
Okay, and we'll share your name in the comments, along with some of the other things you mentioned. So thank you, Federico, and thank you everyone who's been watching. This is Work Life Leader Live. We're going to be back. We have some really great guests coming up, and we hope you'll join us. And if you don't catch this live, we have lots of recordings that we will share regularly. But thanks again, everyone watching, and Federico, thanks so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.